So hello everyone, and welcome to the latest SITE webinar. IEEE SITE is a special interest group on humanitarian technology, and we're very excited to be able to present the topic that we have for you all today. And SITE was organized as a program to serve as a network of IEEE volunteers around the globe that can partner with underserved communities and local organizations to leverage their technological skills and capabilities for sustainable development. So currently, SITE has over 8,400 members in 106 countries all over the world. We really do have that global connection and global network, but everyone is working in their local areas to make a difference to the challenges that they may have seen around them on an everyday basis. So members can also additionally form groups of volunteers if they'd like to apply for funding from IEEE SITE in order to conduct a humanitarian technology or sustainable development project, which is something that SITE promotes. And currently about 159 groups have been formed, again, in about 54 countries, I believe. And many of those, let's see, about 20 of those groups are currently working on projects or perhaps have others that they are planning and implementing, getting ready for next year as well. So just a very brief overview in terms of why engaging in humanitarian technology activities with IEEE can be beneficial for members. So SITE and its parent committee, the Humanitarian Activities Committee, offer many different opportunities to learn more about humanitarian technology and sustainable development. We've recently launched a course on the IEEE Learning Network all about these topics. So they range in everything from how to plan a project, including members of the community and local stakeholders. There's going to be a new module on assessment and evaluation that will come out within the next couple of weeks. There's one with an introduction to the space. And so these, in addition to other resources that SITE and HAC have developed, can be very helpful in learning more about this important area. And of course, through different opportunities, SITE also offers members with the ability to develop either as students or professionals, and that's mainly through the projects that we fund. So if there are people who are, learning something at their job or learning something perhaps in school, they can take those skills and apply them in real life settings. And the final thing I'll mention, you can see the other areas we have here, but the final thing I'll mention is just this connection and community that SITE fosters. As I mentioned, we have members all over the globe and groups working on projects in many different countries. And just being able to connect members with those of similar interests, similar passions, and perhaps even doing similar work is something that makes SITE very unique within IEEE and within the sustainable development space as well. So these slides, as I mentioned, will be shared at the end. So we will share this one with some just suggestions for next steps and how you can become further involved. But at this point in time, I'll go ahead and hand it over to the SITE Education Subcommittee Chair, Dr. Fernando Guarin, so he can talk a little bit more about today's topic and introduce our speakers. Fernando?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Juliana. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank Michelle Jordan for putting this very nice program we have for you together this morning. And of course, to our speakers. And, as you realize, sustainable technology is at the core of what we do at SITE. So we're very privileged to have such a distinguished group of speakers today. So first, let me introduce Clark Miller, who is the director of the Center for Energy and Society at Arizona State University, where he researches sustainable solar energy futures. We'll have Saurabh Biswas, who is a PhD candidate in sustainability and studies complex phenomena and design strategies at the intersection of poverty, energy systems, and sustainable futures in marginalized communities. Next, we will have Yamar Rivera Matos, who is a PhD student and a graduate research associate in the School for the Future Innovation in Society and Studies, Solar Energy Technologies and Communities at the Grassroots Level, Sustainable Futures and Critical Theory. Then we'll have Angel Echeverria, who is a graduate research associate in the School for the Future Innovation in Society. Then Alex Killen, who is an electrical engineering PhD student at Arizona State University, studying characterization techniques and degradation mechanisms for photovoltaics. And last but not least, Tara Nitzold, who is a PhD student in material science engineering at Arizona State University and a previous IGERT SUN fellow. Her work is focused on improving the efficiency and application of flexible and thin-film solar cells. So as you can see, we have a very nice group of speakers for today. And once again, thank you to Michelle and Juliana for assembling this very nice program. So with that, I will turn it to Dr. Clark Miller to open up the session.
Thank you very much, Fernando and Juliana, for inviting us to be here this morning. We're really excited to share with you some of the work that our great students have been doing at Quest on the topic of user-centered solar energy, and with a focus on enhancing the value and impact of technology in people's lives. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Quest, we're one of the largest US research centers focused on advancing photovoltaic technologies, but with a particular impact on ensuring that those technologies can have the social and economic and environmental impact that they need to have in order to help transition the global energy systems towards sustainability. And within that, part of our vision is also to make sure that as we transition to carbon neutral solutions, we also build the kind of interdisciplinary expertise and knowledge and skills that we need to help the energy system contribute more broadly to the sustainable development challenges of the world. And one of the central themes of that work, which you're going to hear about today, is the idea of creating social value through energy innovation that is user-centered. And so with that, I will turn the presentation over to our awesome students. Alex will go first, and then Tara, and then Gia and Angel to talk about 3 different projects that they've been involved in. And so Alex, go ahead and just let me know when you'd like me to advance the slides.
Okay. Well, thank you, Clark. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to talk about a particular experience that we had with working with Engineers Without Borders for installing systems at the Navajo Nation here in northern Arizona. See the next slide, quick. So we were presented a very specific issue. A lot of the residents at the Navajo Nation, and we were working with the Untitled Chapter in particular, are very far from any type of electrical infrastructure. And without having any electricity, many of these users have no source of refrigeration at the very minimal. Some of the community members just use ice and coolers. And because of their lack of refrigeration, a lot of the community has very poor dieting, and they eat nothing but non-perishables. So there's a lot of health risks exposed there. And in particular, diabetes is very severe. And without having refrigeration, there's a lack of cold storage for their insulin. So just by this community not having electricity, they're presented a lot of very straightforward issues. And these are the issues that were presented to us to try to design a solution for using solar. And the engineering design cycle, which us being primarily engineers working on this problem, this is basically how we come at it. We start with defining the problem, create a solution, and then we try to build our solution and then test it, and hopefully that is the solution that we need to fix the problem. But from tackling humanitarian projects, I think us as engineers, we need to put more emphasis on defining the problem. So in humanitarian projects, the problem seems to usually be self-defined for us, whether that be us responding to a emergency such as a natural disaster, or us trying to just provide basic necessities, more like what this project is linked with. But what we've learned is that it's really important to actually get to know the user and understand what is their actual context, what do they plan to use the system for. And this can be done by conducting surveys, interviews. It's a concept that's taught a lot with entrepreneurship and business, but I don't see why there's any need for us to not use it here. So as I said, our problem seemed to be pretty straightforward, but after actually working with the user, we learned that he didn't actually have much of a desire for refrigeration. It seemed like he might use it if we provided it to him, but his biggest actual desire was just to have some type of electricity for entertainment. This user is completely immobile, sits at home by himself all day, and he was more excited about the idea of just getting to watch movies. And so for us, we were able to take that local context provided by himself and combine that with the actual problem that was presented to us to try to design a system that would fit both of those needs. So as we got into this process, we learned that the user was very disconnected. And part of that's because he doesn't have much of a technical background. He's not an engineer by trade, such as ourselves. So we try to take the approach of using the psychological term called the IKEA effect. And many of you, I'm sure, have heard of this, but if you haven't, IKEA is the famous store where you buy the box of parts and you build your stuff yourself. And this term came to fruition because it's been proven that when you build something yourself, you have more of a attachment to that product, and you hold it at a higher value. So we've learned that by making the user part of the process, whether that be incorporating them into the design, asking for their feedback, and really trying to design around them. And also when we get to the actual building steps, having the user help build the system with us and not make it about us making something for them, but make it about all of us collectively making something that they will be able to use. We've learned that by taking that approach, and including them in the process, they seem to be more attached to the system and want to help maintain it and upkeep it the best they can. And one major step that we learned the hard way in this project is you have to spend a lot of time trying to educate whoever the user is on how the system works. And that's just because the system is designed by us for humanitarian projects. They're not typically always perfect. And for us, we had a connection come loose after we installed our first system. And the user being about 5-6 hours away from us, it's hard to troubleshoot very in a timely manner. But by us providing some type of user manual that could at least pinpoint different parts of the system, we were able to actually fix the system over the phone. And by them fixing it themselves, they had a better appreciation for how it all worked and helped make the system more sustainable in the long run, knowing that we're not going to be there every day to help make the system last as long as possible. So by using these concepts, we were able to install a small PV off-grid system with some battery storage. We provided some refrigeration where we've learned that the user is actually buying some fresh produce and having a little bit better of a diet. But most importantly, every time I talk with our first system owner, he's extremely happy about all the movies he's getting to watch. And the system has gone down on 2 separate occasions, but one occasion the user is able to fix it with us, and the second occasion the user fixed it on his own. So the system's been up and running for about a year, and we're hoping that we can install a few more systems after this and coronavirus kind of set us back for this semester, but we're on track to install 4 more systems once all of this blows over. So thank you for everyone, and I want to especially thank EPICS, Engineers Without Borders, and the Shanto Reservation for helping us put this project all together. And my email is below right there in case anybody wants to reach out for any questions. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Tara Nietzold to talk about her experience in Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, good morning, everyone. So my name is Tara Nietzold, and I would like to start my project by saying that I think ours was what we would call like a user-centered approach. And so we were focusing on really how the social and technical context in the community might help us guide our project a bit more. You can go next slide. Yes. Okay, great. So our project was, the goal of our project was to create a solar system for a local community center in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, that would basically be removable prior to a storm. And so the goal was that because a lot of the time, if people have solar installations and a hurricane comes, the systems tend to go down either because the panels are physically lost, like blown away, or because they're cracked or shattered. And when you lose one panel, it affects the functioning of the entire system. So the goal was to create a system that the community could easily remove, which meant coming up with new panels and new materials to be used that were lightweight and easily accessible for all members of the community, but in particular, the community leaders, which are older men. And so, getting up on the roof and taking down heavy silicon panels is not necessarily an option that they have available to them. So you can see on the right here is an example of the panels that we use. They're completely flexible, thin film panels, and they can be rolled up and easily passed down between two people. So the complete assembly and disassembly of the system really only requires two community members, which was a pretty cool capability that we developed. So next slide, please. So like I said, when it came to this project, we knew from experience and talking to people who had done other similar projects that there is a huge need for incorporating the people that are involved in the project and relating the project to them. And it's not just a matter of, delivering a set of solar panels and being able to kind of set it up and leave it behind. So we tried our best to focus on understanding the social context. And we did that first by going to the community and just having a conversation with them. So before we really definitively decided if we were going to move forward with the project in this area, we went and we conducted a series of very casual interviews, just kind of on the ground, talking to people around and asking them, what were their needs and what would they do with a solar panel. So trying to understand who they are, how solar could potentially benefit them in their area, and really to establish some type of relationship. They know our faces, they know our names, and vice versa. And with that relationship, also hoping to establish some trust. So, being very consistent when you say you're going to go to something or show up at a certain time, proving to them that they can trust that we're going to be good on our word and that we can also trust them. And I think that helped a lot setting the platform for the project. And we also, so the top picture is a picture of us with some of the community members. So we got really close to them and also their families, because that's an important part of their lives. But then the bottom picture is a picture of a presentation that we gave at a nearby Rotary Club, so one from a bordering community. And this was really helpful because the Rotary Club is involved in a lot of humanitarian projects in the area. And so it was great to get their feedback and see, if they thought how they thought the project would go, and give us some advice. And so I think this kind of outreach, connecting with the community and local communities, helped to engage the people that we were serving, and also helped to open up the potential for new projects with other communities, because we're really advertising, what we're capable of doing. And one thing that I thought was super interesting during this process was, everything has multiple challenges, but one that we faced when it came to the people is we came into the project thinking that, you know, that they would really benefit from having a system that's removable prior to a storm. And that was our main focus, was just this kind of concept of storm resilience, something that can be used for energy production after a storm and the grid is down. But for them, what they thought was their need was really offloading their electricity bill on the day to day. So they were really excited about the system and having PV and battery backup as a way to cut costs. And, you know, for a community center, especially, that was super beneficial because that means they can spend more money on computers and services for people. But we were kind of balancing, you know, how we have these two different opinions as to what really the goal or the purpose of the project is. So it's never straightforward. But so in addition to the social context, then we looked at the technical context, because some of us are engineers, and, you know, part of the project was also how are we actually going to install solar panels on this roof and make the flexible system work. And so, you know, we took into consideration a lot and tried to also educate the community members when we were doing it on how we calculate, you know, load, how we calculate how much storage they would need. And so we did some exercises with them, like, you know, walking around and looking at what appliances they have, how much load it would require, and for how many hours they use it. So again, trying to incorporate, to the best of our ability, some degree of education, which helps them feel involved and up to, you know, informed as to what's going on, and not just, you know, we're moving around and installing a system. And so one of the challenges that we had on the technical side of things was, you can see on the right here is a picture of the roof. And right through the middle of the roof where we wanted to install the solar panels is this tube covering electrical wiring. And so, you know, that was a challenge. We were debating how are we going to go around it. And in the end, actually, the community members took the initiative and they said that they were going to rework it. And they did some electrician work themselves and managed to move it around so that we could put the panels on the roof. So in the end, like I said, we tried to focus on as many different aspects of keeping the community involved as possible. So that ranged from, you know, allowing them to be educated on the system, allowing them to work very closely. So when the system was installed, they worked hand in hand with the installers to learn how the system works with the batteries and the inverters and everything, how that should get disconnected prior to removing the panels. And they also were even actually involved in installing the panels, which was based on their own incentive and their own desire to be involved. So here you can see the man on the far right is actually a community member leader. I think he was the vice president. The woman in the middle was from our project from Arizona State University. And then the man on the left is for the installation company. So it was people from all different aspects of life, all different backgrounds, working together and investing their time and their energy into the project. So in the end, I think it was really successful, but there were definitely some shortcomings when it came to, you know, having them involved, because I can tell now as we continue to keep in contact with them, I think still their connection to the system is a little bit detached because they didn't pay for it and they didn't, you know, do every single small detail of it. So I think that, you know, moving forward, again, we can become more and more user-centered, which I think now. I will pass it off to, well, I'd like to say thank you first to my collaborators, of course. So Jessica Otten, David Krantz, and Max Patterson were involved in the project from ASU, and then Joan and everyone at the community center in Puerto Rico. So yeah, so now I would like to pass it off to Gia and Angel so they can talk about their project.
Thank you, Tara. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Giamma Rivera Matos, and me and Angel will share another story about user-centered solar energy project in Puerto Rico. So next slide, please. Solar energy community projects in Puerto Rico has many forms, and people have many reasons to engage with solar. And three examples of why communities choose solar has been that in rural areas where the connection to the national grid is poor. Another way has been because as a form of protest, because in the south area there's a lot of carbon plants. So people has been saying like we have an alternative and this alternative is solar. Also to generate energy security and resilience in case of disasters. In 2017, 2 hurricanes impacted Puerto Rico, causing devastation, including the energy infrastructure to fail. The blackouts in the remote areas, where is the case that we're going to talk about today, last for over 9 months. So solar energy, cables, and batteries became a solution, bringing with it complex question about the transitions and how that energy transition should happen, how will happen, for who, and who is going to benefit from it. So solar energy has become an energy technology of the people in Puerto Rico, specifically in the center of the island, in the mountain range. So they want this to be intentional about creating a prosperous future. So next slide. And so here are a couple of pictures about how different shapes that solar take in the town that we are working on. And for example, in the bottom left, you can see a indigenous festival that has been happening like for over 40 years in Jayuya, Puerto Rico, and they were able to do it because they had like, there was a mixed energy, but they had solar panels, so that was something that they utilized to mix culture, Puerto Rican culture and energy, and for me that was fabulous. And above you can see like elderly engaging with solar because they spent like more than 12 months without energy, so they decided to have their own projects. So now next slide, I will talk about a little bit about the purpose-bound research and experiment in Veguita Sama. And this community is in Jayuya, Puerto Rico, in the mountainous range. And Veguita Sama is one of the communities that have been working towards sustainability even before the hurricanes in 2017. However, with Hurricane Maria and Irma in 2017, their situation went worse, so they decided to put a greater effort on the emancipatory project that consisted in changing their culture and behavior through different technologies, including solar energy. So the pilot project experiment started with people from the community engaging with the environmental activists in sustainability training to become a sustainable community. So the initial project was solar energy because that was what they needed the most at the moment, but it's not only that technology. After the training, the community designed their own surveys, and that's what you see here. Like they had this survey to evaluate the solar potential in their community before installing any equipment. They wanted to know if this technology was really what they wanted and what they needed before investing their money and their time on the project. And so characteristic of this pilot project, they started small with an emergency solar system after they did this survey. So they decided that they wanted to go solar, but they wanted to go solar with small because that's what they can afford and that's what the need were. So, but they continue to be connected with the utility because they said that right now for them it's cheaper to have like solar energy integrated with the grid than being off grid. So they collectively decide how they were going to implement solar energy technology in the community. They were very strict with the funding and donation that they received because they wanted this project to be theirs and have energy in the agency in the technology. They also got trained into install solar energy equipment. Obviously, not all people in the community, but they had like 3 to 4 people that went and took the training and learned how to install solar equipment. They developed also a mechanism where people were able to pay for the solar system without creating new financial dependencies. And that was great. And they started interconnecting this project with other projects such as communication and food. That part is where Angel will talk about in the next slides. That connection and how their vision have started like paying them back what they invested 3 years ago. So Angel.
Thank you, Gia, and hi everyone. So What I want to talk to you about in this picture, this is a picture of the people in the community that have learned how to install and work with these systems. This in particular is an initiative they took in preparation to hurricane season 2019 after Hurricane Maria. That was Hurricane Maria was 2017, but in 2019 they had a Hurricane Dorian, and so they had installed several of these equipment through the community, and this team that they took capacitation for working with these systems. They went all over the community, making sure that the system were safe, uh, or if they were not, they could remove them and put them in safety. At the same time, this was not just an effort of this small group. They also took the opportunity to also keep developing capacity in the community. So when these people came to the houses in which these systems were installed, they also took the families and people living there with them uh, to continue developing capacity, to continue sharing the knowledge they have created, also to continue improving the system. They were observing what they could do to improve after they put them back, the system together. So they were measuring or looking for better angles, adjusting to the season. That was a very good initiative of them, because they are continuously growing and adapting to the new environment and the new situations that they are facing. We need to understand that these are not one-time interventions. We are living in changing. We are living in transition with the now climate change. Everything, all situations is changing. So these people are adapting as well their needs and evolving with the systems. So Clark, can you put next slide? Thank you. So this one is a picture of another initiative that they have after they have installed energy systems. This is early planning effort that they took to design a communication network. So they get this map of the community. They started strategizing where to put different radios so they can communicate each other through the community. One thing that we have, what they experience in the after Hurricane Maria, is that all the communication towers, most of them, were down. So they were also without ways of communicating to each other. These are remote and isolated communities. So they needed to communicate. So they designed this network. They put specific people that they also train to be in charge or in the role of communicating with the rest of the community. And this is all because it's not entirely big, but it is part. These are interdependent. These systems are interdependent to each other. So they put these charger stations with the solar panels to enable for the communications. As a whole, what I want to say and share with you is that renewable energy, but in this case solar, offers us new opportunities. This is not that we go and install one system for the benefit or one people or one person. It's that by installing one or several system, we can get more benefit out of it for the collective. This is now everyone in the community. Not all of them have solar panels, but everyone in the community is benefiting from these services now that they have allowed, for example, with the communication network and now the safety and the tranquility, they feel that they are much more prepared for newer other situations they have to face. So with that, I would say thank you to you all and leave it to Clark.
Sorry, did you want me to show part of the video on L?
No, we just wanted to put the link in case anyone wanted to know more about the community.
Great, thanks. Cool, thank you, everybody. Gia, Angel, Tara, Alex, I really appreciate your comments here this morning. And now I'm delighted to be able to turn the discussion over to Sarah Biswas, who has just successfully defended his dissertation in the School of Sustainability. Yay, Sarah, it's fantastic to see him finish up. He's been responsible for much of our initiative in this area over the last 5 years and has done a lot of work with user-centered solar energy projects in Nepal, the Philippines, and Uganda and Sierra Leone. And so I think he's a great person to kind of synthesize everything and lead us into the open discussion.
Thank you, Clark, and thank you to all our speakers for talking about your wonderful project. And it's amazing how beautifully they tie together and they draw out a set of best practices or thumb rules that make these projects integrated in the communities that they are, and they are meaningful projects that are driving different forms of well-being, either it's health outcomes or it's recreation, education, climate resilience. Different forms of outcomes are being created for the communities. So technology is one piece of it. As you have seen, solar energy technology, it's been used in different kinds of setup in all three projects. Either it was small home-based off-grid or it was a community center. So the configurations varied, but the core technology remained the same. However, the important aspect of all three projects that ties them together is how they managed the uncertainty and the variability of the social context that they were set in. So you can see there is an underlying theme of best practices that came along with the project, along with the technology in all the three stories that you have heard. These were the processes that integrate the project within the user communities, tie them together positively and in meaningful ways. You heard about Tara talk about buy-in. You heard Alex and GMR and Agno talk about participation and engagement of the users in the project. So these are important outcomes, and these are important drivers of success in projects which are situated in the community context. So if we were to draw out three best practices, themes that reoccur throughout the three projects, the first would be the identification of needs. So how much energy is required by the different users? Where in their space do they want the energy to be utilized? And when? What time of the day would they need their energy? And in what forms? So that's important to begin that engagement and identify the needs of the users in terms of using the energy. The second is to understand and be nimble about understanding the particular context. The context could mean the physical context where the infrastructure is to be set up. As you saw in Tara's project, they had to work around certain barriers in the physical space where the project had to be put in. So that's understanding the physical context of where this has to go in. But also, all these projects were situated in difficult weather and climate conditions. So it's important to understand how the climate would behave over seasons, over different years, and to make the project, the technology installation, the infrastructure installation to to withstand the effects of that oscillations and changes in the climate. And also there is the massive source of variability and uncertainty in terms of the social organization. Each community, each place would be organized in different ways. In some places, it would be a complete grassroots and bottom-up initiative where a group of residents or citizens might take the initiative. In other places, there would be some administrative office from the local government that gets involved with this. And in other cases, it could be completely humanitarian, as was the case with Engineers Without Borders in Alex's case. So there are different forms of social organization that determine in what ways the project would be managed, would be governed, and that is an important part of the context. And then finally, as you see from all three projects, they were designed for more than energy. They were not simply designed to supply electrons to people. They were designed to create value in people's lives in multiple ways. It does not assume that electricity would naturally create benefits for users. Rather, they invested time and effort in understanding in what ways electricity would be useful. Their projects were able to foster the local culture. They were able to support the cultural activities within the communities. They were able to create avenues for better recreation and knowledge sharing among people in the community. In some of the cases, it helped build a stronger community where the community came together and talked about possibilities of doing things that brings more development and improved outcomes for people in the community. So the design has to go beyond just providing electricity and explore better propositions of value creation. And these three best practices are not isolated. In fact, they all go in tandem and as a continuous process of exploration in engaging with the communities and exploring the different forms of value proposition. And then the energy project becomes a complement to the aspirational outcomes of the community. So with that, I would turn over to Clark to open up the question and answer session for our speakers.
Great, thanks, Saurabh. And just a quick reminder to please send in your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and our participants will answer. You have their bios here, so you can go back and look at them later. Fernando also gave them earlier. Thank you all for listening and for being here with us this morning. You can find out more about what Quest is doing at our website, and we're happy to answer questions. And I think, Tara, there's a couple of questions for you already in the chat.
Okay, yeah, I think these ones from Fernando, right? I did not answer. Okay, so Fernando wants to know what were the efficiency of the panels that we installed, the flexible ones, how do they compare to what you can get with rigid PV cells? So yeah, the panels that we installed, I think at the time that we bought them were somewhere around 17.5% efficiency. They were rated at 430 watts each. And so it's true that they're not all the way as efficient, and in terms of lifetime, it's a newer area of modules as well, so people are still trying to understand how long do they really last in the field. But we did sacrifice a bit in terms of efficiency and long-term reliability for the ability to have the lightweight panels. And part of it, again, too, as a researcher, is that it was a little bit of an experimental thing. We didn't know, You know, we've never installed panels that are lightweight like this. We don't know how well can they be removed and replaced. So so we, you know, we're also trying to experiment a bit and see how really they could do. So.
And so you're maintaining an ongoing conversation with the folks there, and are you monitoring the performance or anything like that?
Yes, so we have a monitor that was installed by the company that did the more intricate parts of the installation. So, and the community members actually, which was a cool outreach thing that we did, or and again, another way of helping them be involved, is they have access to tracking how the panels are doing. And I know in the beginning when it was first installed, they thought it was super cool. They could see like how much energy did they produce that day, and they could go and watch it. So we have monitoring that us ourselves here can monitor, as well as the community members are keeping track of. And another thing that we did is because, again, it was somewhat experimental. We don't know if the first time they remove the panels, one will get damaged. We did leave one extra panel. So if something happens with one and it starts to seem like it's doing really poorly, they can also replace at least one panel. You know, again, because part of the challenge is the cost and people not having the ability to buy new panels. So we hopefully covered some of the bases there. And again, we're just trying to find out now the results of the project long term. So thank you for the question.
Okay, and we've got another question that's just recently come in the question and answer section. I'm curious about variation in the size of project networks. It seems to project on the Navajo Nation, or perhaps the project on the Navajo Nation involved a fairly small network of engineering team members and community members. However, the other two projects involved larger networks. What roles did industry play? So, but anyone who wants to jump in on that question, go ahead.
I think I'll defer to someone else that did work with industry more. But in our particular project with Navajo Nation, one of the users there, or not users, one of the caretakers of our users, he's actually kind of like their handyman. So I would say he's not necessarily industry, but he's kind of who we've used as our industry. He's helped do a lot of the system maintenance for other systems around the community, and has kind of played a major role in the systems that we've installed to ensure their success after we're gone. And we are currently, for our future systems, working with Stace, a solar company out of Canada, for possibly designing like plug and play kits that they will help fund a little bit for future systems.
Thanks, Alex. Let me also say that in another project that we've been involved in that Sarab led, which was his work in Nepal and the Philippines and Uganda, and there was also another team that worked in Bolivia. We've been working with local solar energy businesses and local solar energy NGOs to help teach them methods of user-centered energy innovation. And so, Sarab, maybe you want to say a little bit about how working with those local business and nonprofit organizations can contribute to helping grow local capacity and scale the impact of this kind of user-centered work.
Sure. That is actually a great example of how businesses can become part of this effort in creating designs that are user-centered, and that in fact feeds back to their ability to enhance their business and expand their product lines. So in several cases, this is especially true in the Philippines and Uganda, is where businesses were working throughout the distribution chain at different levels. The primary challenge they were facing is the lack of visibility on how users require the energy system to be structured, what kind of products they need, at what price point. So there was a visibility gap, and there was a lot of assumption that was driving business practices, new products being introduced. So one of the key value creations of introducing user-centered design processes to local businesses, also the supply chain, the broader supply chain that was supplying inverters, solar panels, is understanding the variabilities and typical ways in which users desire energy. So it could be the payment arrangements that user require given their income and expense patterns, or it could be the nighttime load design for a particular system. um, and when it comes to retail, there was in Uganda there were several retail stores in remote and rural areas that were selling energy products. Um, and how do the products that were stocked in the store fit with the lifestyles of people, like cooking, the cooking preferences, movement, the commute and movement throughout the day. These were important factors that inform the user's choice of their energy system or energy products. And these usually are blind spots that the businesses suffer from. So user-centered design practices create that connection, giving businesses a better view of what the user's needs are and how they can better use energy services and products in their lives. And also builds trust in the user that the service provider is actually concerned about their well-being and is investing time and effort in understanding their needs. So that's how user-centered methods are beneficial for both the industry to improve their understanding as well as amongst users to get the better value out of the service.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. So it looks like we got another question, and it's in the process of being answered, but I'll go ahead and just see if anybody has any more thoughts to add here. This question comes from Javier. How do you manage expectations with end users as they get access to electricity in their communities? Are they connecting more devices to the solar system and thus increasing the load? So Alex has shared a little bit of his experience with the project in Navajo Nation. So perhaps if someone else wants to talk a little bit about if they ran into any of those issues with their projects.
Yeah, we definitely did also, which is why we spent a lot of time trying to educate them in the beginning, like what can and cannot be powered by the system, so that they understood, how loads worked, because they got really excited by the idea of having solar. So then they wanted to go out and, buy a better AC unit and all these things that could then be covered by the solar. And we kind of had to say, okay, wait, take a pause. It's not going to be quite like that. So I think education also helped a bit, trying to teach them. Like, we also did an outreach activity where you can plug a device into an outlet and then plug whatever into it, like your cell phone or a hair dryer, and you see how much load it uses. And so we actually did that as a community event. So other people who use the community center also got a bit of education as to, how plugging a hair dryer in is different from charging your cell phone. So I think that helped a lot, because then people, when they really saw the numbers, they realized, okay, there are things that are much more power intensive than others. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but helping them learn is beneficial for sure.
I would add on to what Tara said, that as it is equally important to learn from users about their aspirations for evolving their demand as it is to teach users. There's an interesting example from a project that we designed in Nepal, a solar mini grid, where this was precisely the problem. And we see we saw around the village that we designed this project for, there were several other solar projects around in different villages around in the vicinity, and they all were running into this problem. So what we did there was what Tara described, to educate the users and made them see the difference between plugging in a cell phone and plugging in a rice cooker, which is a larger resistive load, into the system, and how that can trip the entire system. Uh, and reinforcing this message frequently, and we use the monthly bill collection platform reinforce this message. But we also developed a way to understand what the users want to use next once they are getting access to electricity and their needs evolve. So the person who went to the people, or when people came to the bill collection center, they would answer 2 to 3 questions as to how they're using electricity and what their next desired appliance is. So that would give the project managers a track of how the users are planning to improve their load, and they could make adjustments on the supply side based on that. So it's a two-directional communication that is required to make this a process transparent and communicative.
I think this is a crucial point, and I'm really glad that Sarab raised the discussion of the financial dimensions. A lot of times when we do these humanitarian projects, we're doing them in a context where we're providing energy systems at either no or low cost to the local communities. And we've certainly found in other contexts that as part of the buy-in effort, you can actually also secure a lot of buy-in and commitment in contexts where there's a financial contribution on the part of the community itself to the project. And we've done that in a couple of our projects in Nepal, for example, that one of my colleagues, Netra Chetri, has organized. And that really helps make sure that the community is putting their needs and interests front and center, because they feel they now have an ownership stake in this. But even more importantly, the financial piece is critical as you transition from thinking about these as one-off projects, as Sarab said, to thinking about it as an energy system that's going to serve the community and grow with the community over time. And if you don't design for that from the get-go, it can be much, much more difficult. But if you do design for it, then you can think about scalability and expandability of the system. You can think about how the community wants to be able to think through the financial dimensions of growing that system over time, what kind of thinking they need to do, what kind of capacity build they need to do, what kind of fundraising they need to do in order to grow this energy providing system with their needs over time. So I'm glad that got brought up. Thanks.
I agree. I think that was some really good points that you mentioned, Sarah. And then just for our last question, in the interest of time, we kind of got a follow-up question from Javier, referring back to that training that you mentioned for the users and the educational component of your projects. In terms of, for either Alex or Tara or Sarah, in any of those cases, have you tracked the progress of the users after the training? And did you see that the training improved the use of the system?
Yeah, so we haven't had as much feedback yet afterwards, just primarily because of the whole coronavirus situation. And Navajo Nation's been hit particularly hard, so we wanted to try to avoid being in that area the best we can for their safety. But in regards to their own kind of education, the individual that I spoke to as being their handyman, he's actually done a lot of the education for us. He actually has a solar system that was installed over 25 years ago on his property that's still operating. So that was actually kind of cool to see from somebody that studies degradation of solar. But yeah, he's actually done a lot of the education there in their community and more of how it works. And they, before we got there, actually had a couple small systems deployed at the same house that were just too small to really do much. But this is something that we do want to actually work on as we're trying to progress towards installing more systems at a faster rate. We do want to see how the education's working and try to see how we can improve that process.
Thanks for sharing those insights, Alex. Very interesting to be sure. Okay, so at this point in time, I see that we're just about at a little bit past 12. So does anyone have any closing thoughts that they would like to share with our attendees today?
So this is Fernando. I'd really like to once again thank you all for sharing on your experiences and knowledge. I think this is a very fruitful discussion, and I'm sure many other people that are thinking about PV projects will be able to draw from your expertise and learning. So thank you very much.
Let me just add my thanks both to IEEE site for sponsoring the webinar series, which I think is a great set of tools for people to learn about these things. And I'm really excited to hear about all of the work that you're doing around the world. And also to all of our students for all of the work that they're doing, especially in these projects, working with communities, and not just having impact in those communities, but learning how to have impact more broadly and being willing to come here and share those insights with us this morning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. This was a fantastic webinar, definitely one of my favorites from the time that I've been involved. We really appreciate the time and the effort that you put into your presentations. And like Dr. Fernando mentioned, we know that this will be of great interest to our members, just knowing that this is an area where many people are either planning or conducting projects. So thank you all very much.